My name is Carlton Cartwright, and I'm the Executive Director for the Children's Coalition Incorporated. And today is November 27th, 2019, and we are at the Thanksgiving home of...
The Airbnb Thanksgiving home.
There you go, that one. Sir, what is your name?
It's Anthony Mowry.
Okay, Anthony. Thank you. And Anthony, how old are you?
I'm 42.
Okay. And when is your birthday?
My birthday is April 15th, 1977.
Okay. And where were you born?
I was born in Fullerton, California.
Okay, good. All right. And what is your current address?
My current address is 963 Queen Road. That's in Venice, Florida.
Right.
34293.
Okay. Okay. What branch of the service were you in?
Well, I'm in the United States Air Force. I was active duty for 6 years, and now I'm an active reservist.
Oh, okay, cool. All right. So where do you do your reserve duty?
Right now, I do my reserve duty at Joint Base Andrews outside of D.C., home of Air Force One.
Oh, okay. All right. All right. Nice. So, where were you born? Where?
In Fullerton, California.
Okay, that's right. Okay.
Yep.
And where were you at the time you went into service before you went in?
I was actually a staff attorney at the United States Court of Appeals for the 11th Circuit in Atlanta, Georgia.
Okay. All right. And that was prior to going into the service?
Yes. I actually tried... I applied for the Coast Guard while I was in law school, but because of my color blindness, the Coast Guard would not, it's a small service, so they would not waive that, I guess, physical defect.
Disability?
Disability, sure.
Okay, I guess.
I guess, if that's what you want to call it.
I guess.
They don't let me fly planes, I can tell you that.
Right.
Or drive boats.
But it was okay with the Air Force?
But the Air Force granted a waiver, so after law school I took a job with the Court of Appeals for the 11th Circuit, and then joined the United States Air Force after 2 years of doing that job.
So you said you went to law school?
Yes.
Where?
Temple University in Philadelphia. Go Owls.
Huh?
Go Owls.
Gotcha. Okay. How old were you when you started college?
When I started undergrad, I was 18. I went straight from high school. I went to North Central College, North Central College, which is in Naperville, Illinois. I worked for a couple of years and then went back to law school at Temple, I guess when I was 25. So I graduated when I was 28. And then didn't join the service till I was, I guess I was 30.
Okay.
Before I was joined the Air Force, actually. So I was a little older than most.
So how old were you when you actually went in? Gotcha.
30, yeah. So,
okay.
So a little bit older than most.
Right.
Certainly most enlisted folks, but even officers, I was just a bit older. Although I did come in the way that lawyers commission is with the doctors and the nurses, and so that it wasn't the age gap. There were a lot of people. There were some folks who were quite older than me, even.
Right.
That had to get age waivers.
Right.
So
the limit was 35.
Yeah, that's the official limit, but the Air Force can grant a waiver. So we actually had, this was at the time, so I joined in 2007. There's a lot of, as you'll probably recall, PTSD cases coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan.
Right.
And so they started a program where they granted waivers to psychiatrists and psychologists. And in my commissioned officer training class, there were quite a few folks who were older than 35, but the Air Force was in need of, well, all the services were in need of psychological services folks who could, hospital folks who could help with the psychological issues from the wars in the Middle East.
Right. Wow. Okay, so you were 30 when you went in. Where'd you go to basic training?
So for lawyers and doctors and nurses and medical folks, we go to commissioned officer training.
Right.
So basically we're assessed into the reserves, and then we go to Maxwell Air Force Base in Alabama to do our commission training, which is sort of a shortened OTS. Sometimes it's called, in the service it's sort of called, they call it knife and fork school sometimes.
Okay.
But And it was much easier than, certainly my brother's a Navy officer, certainly easier than whatever he went through down in Pensacola.
Okay.
But yeah, it was training in Maxwell.
All right, did I miss something, or did you say you did active duty first before the reserve?
I did. So it's a sort of a strange commissioning process. Mm-hmm. They actually commission you as an inactive reserve officer, and you instantaneously basically go on active duty.
Oh.
So I was active duty. I was called to active duty technically for 6 years, a little over 6 years, and then I transitioned to the active reserves, where now I do my, the reserve requirements.
Right, the weekend a month and 2 weeks a year.
Yeah, that's so I do that amount of time. I just don't do it on that schedule. I do it all at once. Got it. So.
Okay. Okay, now that you've really got me all over the map, which is a good thing, actually. So, you came in as a reservist?
Yeah, sort of. It's just the statute under which they allow. It's not. It's a little bit technical.
Okay.
It's not that important. The point
I'm just trying to find a jump-off point for your entry into the military.
Oh, okay.
So give that to me.
Sure. Yeah. So I'll tell you the story about it.
Okay.
When I was assessed, you could put down your dream sheet or whatever.
Right.
And I put down that I wanted to go to Italy.
Okay.
Of course, because who wouldn't put that down on their dream sheet?
Right.
Well, that's what I got. So I kind of had to lay low during all the training, as far as all my folks who were going to, some base in Oklahoma or something where they didn't get what they wanted exactly.
Right.
And so at the end of so basically I had to do the commissioned officer training, and then there was a JAG specific school, so a judge advocate school, which is also at Maxwell Air Force Base. But there was a 2-week gap between the end of commissioning and then the beginning of the JAG school, the basic course. And so they said, well, do you want to go, the Air Force actually asked, do you want to go to Italy for 2 weeks, or do you just want to stay in Alabama for 2 weeks? And so I said, well, if I have a choice, I guess I'll go to Italy for a couple weeks. So I went to Italy for 2 weeks, and then came back to Maxwell Air Force Base to do the basic training. But I found an apartment and all that stuff, and sort of got settled in Italy. And then I went back after the Judge Advocate Basic School.
Okay. So what did you do in Italy?
So basically, all JAGs are generalists. It's like it's a small community. It's a small American community overseas, and so you're sort of the base lawyer. So we would deal with anything from, members, landlord-tenant issues, writing wills. We deal with a lot of administrative law stuff. So if there was a question as to whether a commander could do this or that thing under a plethora of different legal authorities, I mean, just too many to name, we would write an opinion for them or advise our boss, who would then advise the commander, the wing commander. But one of the main focuses is when you're a new JAG, at least in the Air Force, is prosecuting cases. So the Uniform Code of Military Justice, prosecuting cases. So the first case I did was a case, I sat second chair for a case where this airman had smoked pot while on duty guarding the base. And so that was an interesting first sort of foray into prosecution. But the thing is, people who graduated from law school at the same time as me weren't doing that interesting stuff, where we're talking about misbehavior of a sentinel on duty in an overseas location. I mean, that was pretty interesting stuff, really.
Okay.
After that, we also did, we operate overseas under various treaties and agreements. The main one, at least in Europe, is the NATO Status Forces Agreement, which is the NATO SOFA, we call it. So interpretations of the SOFA, dealing with the Italians sometimes on what interpretations are, and all the sub-agreements that come under the NATO SOFA. For example, one issue that would come up is Aviano, the base I was at, was not just one singular base. It had a bunch of different areas.
Right.
And so we had a security force that patrolled the areas. Well, the armory was on one main area, but they had to go to these different areas. But in order to get to the different areas, they of course had to drive through Italian sovereign, or at least non-military Italian areas, and the Italians objected to them carrying weapons because we weren't permitted to have weapons off base, firearms. So we had to work out agreements with the locals on how they were going to be transported. But things like that, taxation was a big issue that would come up all the time because we, the BX, for example, the base exchange would bring stuff in, without Italian customs or EU customs being paid and sell to U.S. service members. Well, the Italians, there's a lot of independence in the prosecution or in the administrators in Italy, so they would get upset. Why aren't you guys paying taxes? And there's just little pieces of the SOFA that we would apply, but also just meeting with local officials to make sure they understood why a certain thing was coming through customs and not being taxed the way it is. There's gasoline issues. There's one issue we dealt with in particular, and I'll talk about this in a second, but we car licensing. You bring a car over there, well, you got to put a license plate on it and drive around in Italy, but you can't register a car in Italy because you're not an Italian. You don't have any real legal status there.
Okay.
So you register your car on base, and on base, they used to have, NATO SOFA plates, but that was an OPSEC issue because then you'd have obvious U.S. military driving around a foreign country in a license plate that identified them as such. So what they developed was a system of cover plates so the base was allocated a certain amount of Italian license plates, and it was our obligation to make sure we knew who had which cover plate. They call it a cover plate because you technically had a NATO SOFA plate underneath it, or it was supported by a NATO SOFA plate. So, but those are just some examples of all the issues. It particularly came up during my time overseas. We stood up a base in Hungary called Papa Air Base, which is an old Soviet base. But it was
What was it called?
Papa.
Oh,
Air Base.
Popeye.
Papa.
Okay.
P-A-P-A.
Okay.
With little exit marks.
Right.
But it was basically a non-NATO consortium base where there were 3 C-17 cargo planes parked, and each country, there were NATO countries, but there were non-NATO countries who would have various time allocated in these 3 C-17. So I joked that it was like a timeshare, like a C-17 timeshare base, because everybody got some percentage of whatever money they put into this base. Well, all those same issues came up, when we were standing that base up, and we were the legal office assigned to standing up Papa. So dealing with the VAT, in Europe there's a VAT tax. That's sort of redundant, but it's value-added tax on everything. Well, there's some treaties that say that if you're accompanying the force overseas, you don't have to pay those taxes. And so, but you can't go into your local store in Papa, Hungary, and show them a copy of a treaty and expect them to not make you pay tax. So there had to be some implementing legislation through the Hungarian parliament to make that happen. So it was just a very interesting. This was my first. I had clerked or been a staff attorney at the 11th Circuit, but I never. This is my first real practicing law, and we were dealing with some pretty interesting stuff like that. That was just seeing how the world operated really quickly. Right. So.
You didn't actually have what would be characterized as a normal basic training because of the fact that you went in with your license to be an attorney.
Right. It was a lot different. It was a lot different than a lot of people's experience.
I just wanted to clarify that.
No, yeah, it was quite different, and in a way you had to learn real quickly because you were so. I didn't go through the normal basic training. It wasn't as rigorous, honestly. But then we had to advise commanders on good order and discipline, even though we had sort of gone through a foreshortened, basic training situation. So, we had to, in order to be successful, you had to gain credibility real quickly and make sure that, you understood good order, how to you understood how the commanders thought about good order and discipline and advised them properly and made sure, they were doing the right thing under the law, but also doing the right thing or attempting to get them to do the right thing under, military standards, which when I arrived at Aviano, I had not even really been in the military. And all of a sudden I'm supposed to call a commander and advise him on how to deal with a problem with an airman.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you had to struggle with the code of ethics, I guess, working it out, or
I didn't even know who
working with what you had.
I guess I would phrase it more. It wasn't an ethical or a legal problem. I could tell them how to apply the law, but honestly, I didn't even know who to salute at first. I mean, you just hadn't been in the military for very long, so I arrived in my first duty location, and I was still learning the ranks.
Got it.
So just learning, being a military member was number one. Number two was being a lawyer, but you didn't have any credibility as a lawyer, a military lawyer, if you didn't know anything about the military. So that was the challenge of doing it that way. Now eventually, the other thing is too, you put captain's bars on really quickly in this program, and so I basically within 6 months I had captain's bars, and I'd only been on base for about a month and a half.
Wow.
And I was a captain. Well, you don't know if a captain has been in, walking around base. Nobody knows if I've been in the military for 10 years or, 6 months. Which 6 months was the case. So, but.
Okay, so you did, give me the chronology. You did a couple of weeks in Italy as soon as you went in.
And then I went back to Maxwell,
Alabama,
and did, I think it was about 10 weeks.
And what did you do there?
Just learning. It's tech school, like the tech school,
okay,
what people would call tech school for JAGs. So, we just learned about the UCMJ and Uniform Code of Military Justice and some of the other whatever laws we were going to apply. Back to Aviano, I was there for about 2.5 years.
Okay, all right.
And then...
how was the tour for 2.5 years? That was
fantastic.
That was a full tour.
Yeah, that was fantastic.
Okay, so tell me about that tour.
Well, I mean, aside from, obviously, I was in Italy. We travel a lot. My wife came, I was married at the time. My daughter was born there. We saw as much as we could see.
Where'd you go?
Where didn't we go?
Right.
We went
Countries.
all over Italy. Austria, Germany, Slovenia, Croatia, Greece, England, Liechtenstein, Russia,
Netherlands.
The Netherlands, yeah, Netherlands.
France?
Finland, France a lot, France a few times.
Spain?
We never went to Spain. I've been to Spain, but we never went to Spain. Yeah, and I'm
you
sure
went to Spain.
Some. Yeah, and Norway, Sweden, Finland,
Scandinavia, all of that.
Estonia. We went. It's easier to list the places we didn't go. That's the opportunity.
Did you make it to Germany and Switzerland?
Oh yeah.
Netherlands? We said that.
Yep.
Okay.
All those things. Yeah, the first trip we took actually was to Germany. This is sort of a side story, but I'll tell it anyway.
Go ahead.
Because my wife and I arrived. It was December. We flew on our birthday, which is December 15th.
Right.
And then I was in. So when you arrive on base, we had to do a week of like, welcome to Italy. Here's how you get your phone set up and whatever, like this kind of thing. It was called Bienvenuti, welcome.
Right.
And so we took this course, and somebody in the course said, "Oh, you should go up to this place called Berchtesgaden in Germany." I said, "Oh, okay." So within a couple weeks, my wife and I drove up. We didn't have any kids at the time. We drove up in our little Honda Civic. Well, I had called ahead of time to this place called Gasthaus Demmel.
Right.
And I said, oh, all right, I need a room. We're going to be late. I'm going to leave from work on a Friday. It's going to be late. It was about a 4-hour drive, so we're going to be there at 8 or 9. And he said, it was Max, the owner. He said, okay, what's your name? I said, Tony. He said, okay, well, I'll see you then. No credit card, no last name, no phone number.
Right.
Just took my first name. So we're driving up there through the snow, and I told my wife, I said, there's not going to be a room for us. There's no way this guy reserved this room.
Right.
What kind of thing is this? So we pull in to the Gasthaus Demmel. Find it's late at night, very snowy, and there's a van outside that says Russian Olympic Luge Team, and so we're like, okay. So we go in, and it's one of these old German, guest houses where there's just probably 10 rooms, and you check in at the bar, which is also where you eat breakfast.
Yeah.
And so we go into the bar, and the Max, who I talked to on the phone, said, Tony, you were going to be late. I said, yeah. So he showed us the room. It was fantastic. We came downstairs, and the whole Russian Olympic luge team is drinking beer down. And so we had a beer with the coach, and he said, you guys must be here for the World Championships of Luge. And we said, no, we didn't know anything about the World Championships of Luge.
Right.
So he said, so he's telling us where it was. It was this lake that we didn't know where it was. And so he's describing it. Next day, we were like, all right, well, we're going to go to Salzburg, but let's go to the World Championships of Luge. No kidding. It's the World Championships of Luge. On this luge course at this beautiful alpine lake, clear lake, we were just, so I said, is this whole tour going to be this way? And it sort of was in a way. I mean, it wasn't always that charmed, but yeah, it was a great opportunity.
So how long were you there? 2.5
years.
Oh, okay. And that's where you stayed?
No, that was just the first trip.
Okay.
We had an apartment. There's no on-base housing for family housing, so we were off base in a town called Sacile.
Okay. I visited Albiano, some friends there once.
Oh yeah.
Anyway,
it's a wonderful place.
Yes.
But to me, almost as interesting was the legal work. I mean, I got to go when we were negotiating this. Implementing this treaty with the Hungarians, I got sent TDY to Budapest to essentially help the air attaché at the embassy, who's the Air Force guy, who's not a non-lawyer at the embassy, and try to negotiate this treaty. He was an Air Force colonel. And we got to ride in the U.S. Embassy car to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and ride in this weird elevator and meet with Hungarian officials. And I thought, nobody from my law school class is doing this. So the Air Force, to me, was that kind of stuff where I got to file, my name is probably somewhere in the Milan courthouse because I got to file what they call an assertion of jurisdiction in a case involving extraordinary rendition, which was the cases where the U.S., the CIA, and sometimes foreign services would snatch somebody off the street,
right?
In this case, a Muslim cleric, to go take him to a country where he could be tortured. Not exactly the best example of our history, but history nonetheless, where we had to deal with the consequences of that, sometimes legal consequences for U.S. actions in Italian courts. So that was sort of interesting. So yeah, it was a good assignment both personally and professionally.
Where did you go after Abbiano? What year was it when that was over?
2010.
Okay.
So in 2010, I PCS'd from summer of 2010 to Eielson Air Force Base in Alaska. So what's
the name of it?
Eielson. It's about 45 minutes outside of Fairbanks.
Okay.
So in the interior of Alaska.
Right.
A lot different.
Sure.
So, and I was there for a little over 3 years.
And what was your?
My first job was similar in that I was in the legal office, so we did prosecutions, administrative law, that kind of thing. Then I transitioned to the Area Defense Council, which is the public defender of the base, I guess.
Okay.
So it was just me and another paralegal who was transitioning into this office, and
right.
So that was probably the most rewarding duty I've had so far in the military anyway. It was the focus was defending airmen from adverse actions, court martials, whatever.
From what kind of actions?
Adverse, any kind of, letters of reprimand, Article 15s, courts martial, whatever.
So you were the public defender?
Public defender, yeah.
Okay.
So, and I traveled a lot for that job because, if there was, let's say, for example, this would happen on occasion if there was what they call drug ring.
Right.
So a lot of military members doing drugs, where you couldn't have the same attorney representing all the members of that ring. Okay. Because they'd have a conflict because they'd try to, you'd want to sell your one client out for the other one.
Right.
So you'd have to go. They'd have to pick from different area defense councils from different bases. So I traveled a lot to Malmstrom Air Force Base in Montana.
Okay.
And
where else?
Oh boy, that job I traveled. I did a couple cases in Hawaii, Hickam.
Okay.
traveled down to Joint Base Elmendorf a few times. That's in Alaska.
Right.
That's in Anchorage.
Mm-hmm.
Fairchild Air Force Base in Spokane.
Okay. Washington.
Yeah, Joint Base McCord, Joint Base McCord. I can't remember what it's called. McCord Air Force Base.
What state is that in?
That's in Washington, Seattle,
Okay.
Tacoma. Down to, let's see. I went to Mountain Home Air Force Base, which is in Idaho. Mountain Home, Idaho.
Okay.
For a case, I did a case at the Presidio of Monterey for a guy who got a DUI at the Defense Language Institute. Super smart guy. Made a bad decision, obviously, but very interesting case. Went down to Travis Air Force Base in California.
California, yeah.
Went down to Davis Monthan in Tucson.
Oh, in Arizona.
Yeah, let's see.
Wow.
I think that exhausts the list of where I tried cases, but
Right.
basically all in that western region.
Mm-hmm.
So my wife wasn't happy with me that I traveled so much.
Right.
So we had another baby. Except my second daughter was born when I was when I was on a flight back from Hawaii after a attempted murder case.
Wow.
She went into labor. So that was not. She was born early.
Timing was not good.
No. She was born early, and it was my last case for a while, but I missed the second daughter's birth.
Ooh.
Yeah. I think my wife was more unhappy with it than me, but yeah, it was. She came early, so what are you gonna do?
Right.
She's still around.
I got you. Good. Well, there you go.
Yeah.
That's what counts. Okay. Was that the final tour?
That was the final active tour. Yeah.
Mhm.
So after that, I separated.
Well, you've seen. Okay. Yeah. Before you separated, in the capacity that you served in, I'm just going to take a wild guess and say that one of the answers to my next question is yes. Throughout your active duty military career, were there any casualties, any fatalities that you were aware of?
Well,
or did you ever get hurt? First of all,
what's that? No.
Did you? Okay.
No. I was lucky, I guess. I was never in the cycle to deploy. So.
Okay. Were you ever in combat?
No.
Okay.
No.
So you were never a prisoner of war either?
No.
So casualties that you're aware of?
Well, I was tangentially involved in a lot of, if there was misconduct, there was an EOD case that I was tangentially involved in. I was.
What is EOD?
The explosive ordnance disposal.
What is that?
Ordnance disposal. So it's, the guys who detonate bombs or dismantle bombs or whatever.
Right.
IEDs and such.
Mm-hmm.
And so, there was some misconduct there. Let's see. Probably not combat related. I helped advise on a case where there was a jump, there was an Army, there was a fatality because some mistakes were made by, I don't know who the mistakes were, but let me just go. Allegedly, mistakes were made by an Army jump master and also an Air Force pilot, resulting in a training death of a soldier who was jumping out of an Air Force.
Right.
I don't know if it was a C-17 or C-130. Anyway, jumping out of an Air Force aircraft. But sometimes DUIs. I was a chief of military justice at Aviano when we had a case where there's a drunk driving incident it resulted in a flipped car and a young Italian national girl got crushed in between a retaining wall and so it wasn't, I didn't deal directly with casualties or necessarily fatalities war. I mean, it's almost like you were just dealt with the same stuff you deal with in the civilian world, only it was under the Code of Military Justice.
Right.
So, I had an attempted murder case, for example, but this was an Air Force woman who, I can say not allegedly because she was convicted. She threw a meat cleaver at her boyfriend and hit him in the neck. So she wasn't convicted of attempted murder, just assault with a deadly weapon, aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. So our job was to not get her convicted of attempted murder. We did that, for what it's worth.
Okay.
We dealt, at the time, I was dealing a lot with the sex assault cases in the military.
Okay.
That was the big, that was when, you probably remember a few years ago when there was a 3rd Air Force Commander, General Franklin, granted clemency in a sex assault case out of Aviano. It started a big to-do. Kirsten Gillibrand really, in the Senate, raised the issue and started implementing legislation that resulted in the Military Justice Act, which really changed the military justice system. Well, that commander was my first wing commander who granted clemency in this case. And so, there were questions of undue command influence. But I represented a lot of airmen and prosecuted some too who were accused of sexual assault.
Okay.
So to answer, that's a long answer to the short question. To answer your question, no, not casualties of war, really. I mean, except for a few things here and there. But
the question really wasn't. It's relative to both, to combat and non-combat situations.
Yeah.
So you answered the question.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you follow what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Okay. So
I represent a lot of people at Malmstrom who would go out into, Malmstrom is a missile base. So there's a big missile range. They go look at a hole in the ground, is what we used to say.
Right.
They go guard a hole in the ground for 5 days and then come back for 4 days or whatever. They get in trouble when they're out there. They get in trouble when they come back.
Right.
So different. They get in trouble for different reasons usually.
Right. Yeah.
But I mean some what I would probably say are PTSD related misconduct was a lot of what we would do. Some probably not PTSD related, just misconduct.
Right.
But yeah, I mean.
So you have the range, variety.
Yeah.
Okay. By the way, how was the food?
In Italy?
Throughout.
Well, the food in Italy is fantastic.
Yeah, okay.
The salmon in Alaska is great.
Right. Okay.
That's pretty much it, though.
Right. Okay.
The fish is good.
Yeah.
And moose actually is good. I like moose.
Oh, okay.
If you ever...
I've never had the pleasure. Staying in touch with your family throughout your active duty. Was it an issue staying in touch?
No, when we went overseas, it wasn't quite as easy as it is now. But they had voice over internet protocol was just sort of invented, which I don't even know if that. I know it exists, but it's like you can call on Facebook Messenger now.
Right.
So, and I wasn't in the desert or any. I was in a European country, so communication wasn't exactly difficult.
Okay.
So we had an internet phone where we could call back home. Time difference was a little weird, but
Right.
But no, not. I did deploy on a ship I went on an exercise on a ship, which was a little weird. That's when communications, you don't really get to communicate when you're on a ship.
Oh, really?
On an exercise.
Okay.
So that was sort of interesting, but nothing.
Okay.
That was more interesting than challenging.
Did you keep a diary?
No.
Okay. All right. Well, so tell me now about your reserve.
Well, so I'm an active reservist. What they call I'm an individual mobilization augmentee.
Okay.
They call it an IMA. We joke it really stands for I am alone because you're not attached to I'm not attached to a reserve base or a reserve unit. I'm attached to an active duty base, and when I go do my reserve duty, it's just like I just integrate into an active duty office, and it's just like.
Why did you come off of active duty? Why?
Well,
family.
Yeah, they're upstairs right now.
Gotcha.
I have a big family down in Florida, and I travel a lot, as I said, for the Area Defense Council job. Well, the next likely job I would have been up for would have been what they call senior trial counsel, which was basically a traveling prosecutor.
Got it.
And so we just didn't want to, the travel was already hard enough, and I had an opportunity to join a family law practice, or my aunt's law practice down in my hometown.
Right.
And so I sort of decided at that point that we would stay. I would stay in the reserves, but we would get off active duty.
Okay.
So it was family.
And because that was.
I mean, I missed the birth of my second daughter's. I missed my second daughter's birth due to traveling active duty. So there's likely I was going to miss a lot more. And so I just, we just decided it was time to be done.
So in light of that, you came home. GI Bill, you didn't need to use it for school anymore, did you? Or?
I didn't, no, but the post 9/11 GI Bill is transferable, and I had done enough time that I can transfer it to my children. So the benefits,
cool.
military, yeah. So the two kids, regardless from this point out, I've done my time. They get 2 years of school paid for each.
Wow.
So
excellent.
So
couldn't beat that.
No.
Okay. House? Did you use it to purchase a house?
I use a VA, yeah.
Right, okay.
Yeah. We actually bought two. We bought one in Alaska, sold it before I left, and then...
So what kind of law do you practice now?
I do elder law, so estate planning, trusts, probate, public benefits, guardianship, basically that whole lump of stuff.
Okay.
So...
And I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. You said you had a house in Alaska?
Yeah, we bought a house when we moved to Alaska,
okay.
Which was a challenge. And then... We sold that before we left.
Why was it a challenge?
Well, because it gets to -40 or 50 in Alaska, so...
Oh, that is a challenge. Somebody really has
keeping it heated, just maintenance issues, is a whole different ballgame in Alaska.
Okay, yeah.
So, it was nice. It was a log cabin. It was fun, but we needed to get out of it.
Right.
I didn't want to own it. I didn't want to own a house in interior Alaska, even if it was a rental, and live in South Florida.
Right.
That would have been a little difficult.
Right. Gotcha. Okay. Well, just a couple of more questions, actually.
Good.
Well,
I don't mean good like them.
No.
We're rushing you along.
No. Anyway, I take it for granted that you got along very well with your fellow officers as well as enlisted. Overall.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's a workplace, so but the people particularly the other JAGs, well, not even just JAGs, but just the friends I made in the JAG Corps, both officer and enlisted, became and are still my best friends. They're the people that I call, even if I haven't seen them in years. It's even though we weren't even we weren't in combat together, but still, particularly overseas, in that it's mostly those. The people in Alaska, I don't, there's a few of them I still am friends with, but when you're overseas, you're in a tiny little American town, and I liked being in the community and being in Italy, but you're still an American, serving overseas. So
right.
So there was a certain unique experience to that I think we were bonded.
You've held on to some of those friendships?
Oh yeah. Oh.
That was the next question.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I had a friend. He was a lawyer, but then he decided to become a highway patrolman in California. So he texted me yesterday actually,
right.
And I see him about once every couple of years.
Right.
I have a good friend up in Montana who I see once in a while. A good friend who's now the staff judge advocate at Hurlburt Field, actually, which is right by where we are right now.
Right.
But I talk to them, sometimes it's a year, sometimes it's 2 years, but it's like, no, it's like no time has passed.
Gotcha. Good. So, okay, last two questions. Did your military experience influence your thinking about war or about the military in general?
Yeah, I think so. I don't know how. I think about this question sometimes because I don't know that I joined the military necessarily for a higher, I don't want to be grandiose about. It's not like 9/11 happened and I signed up right away. I sort of did it as a career move in a way, and I think serving for the number of years that I served made me appreciate particularly the operators. I mean, and how important, for example, the NATO alliance and the U.S.'s commitment to that, and the operators who fly the aircraft and the maintainers who maintain the aircraft. I mean, in a JAG, we were always in a support role, and there's other supporting members, but I'm always blown away when I see operators do what they do and operate.
You mean pilots?
Pilots, deploying on a ship. My brother's a submarine officer, so
okay.
I'm equally impressed by him. Don't tell him I said that. But just watching them do what they do is just, I didn't appreciate it, I don't think, the skill and the coordination that goes into the military operations from the outside, like I did from the inside, like I do from the inside. And so, you go in, you say, we support the warfighter. That's our job is to make sure that they, either maintain good order and discipline, or, we're taking care of legal issues so that the operators don't need, they can think about what they need to do.
Right.
And I didn't fully appreciate that at first, but seeing them operate, and the more I knew about military operations and the planning and, just all the people involved in the coordination, it's incredible. So, in that way, yes. I think globally, my military experience in particular made me understand the complexity of international relations more than anything else.
Okay.
When you look at and this may be this is beyond my pay grade of anything I ever worked on, but you look at the Iran nuclear deal, and you have to understand when you're dealing with, if it's a bilateral agreement, you have to understand your own internal politics and what the pressures are, and also understand what the other side is. And I sort of appreciated this by working with the Hungarians on implementing tax relief for U.S. military members stationed at Papa. And then you look at that's a very small issue, 2 countries involved, minor. And then you look at some of these big issues that the world faces, like nuclear proliferation, and you see all these players with various internal pressures on them. And so and just appreciating the complexity of putting something together that can be good for the world and still get all the buy-in from all these countries is just it certainly helped me appreciate the complexity of international relations. Mm-hmm. So,
why did you choose the Air Force, by the way? Why didn't you go into another branch?
That's a good question. I think their commissioning was happening right about the same time that I was. Actually, no, that's not true. I don't know why exactly. I mean, I now love the Air Force, but my dad, who's enlisted Navy in Vietnam, I think on his way to Vietnam, he stopped at Travis Air Force Base, which is one of those flagship Air Force bases. Uh-huh. It's really a really nice base, mm-hmm. And he was, in the Navy going to these, whatever, he didn't go to the nicest places, and so he always said when we were kids, I don't care if you join the military, but if you join the Air Force. They have the nicest stuff. So I'm sure there was some influence of that.
Okay.
So my brother didn't take that advice. He joined the Navy.
Uh-huh.
Now he's stuck under a ship, under the sea in a tiny tube.
Okay.
So, I made the right choice.
Last question. How did your service and experiences affect your life?
It's hard to even count the ways, I don't know what, I certainly would have been, I was already a lawyer. Uh-huh. And so that's one piece of my identity, I guess, that would have remained intact. Mm-hmm. But everything else that I do has some relation to the military, the people I knew in the military, the service, of the military, the places I was able to go through the military, even professionally, the skills that I learned, or as a military student, it's hard to say you learned them. It's you were thrown into something and you had to figure it out. Right. Is more the way to say it, and so you had to cope with whatever situation you had, even though you were probably in over your head half the time. Those skills are, they were invaluable. So, mm-hmm. So I would say in every aspect. I mean, in every aspect of my life, the military is there. So I don't know if that's, appreciating sacrifice in the world, and appreciating. It made me more patriotic, I would say too. So,
Okay.
so I think, just to surmise, whether it's professional, personal, what foods I'm going to cook because I've had them in overseas locations,
Right.
And what I want to try and where I want to go and travel to. It's every aspect of my life has been influenced by my military service.
Okay. Is there anything you feel like you left out?
No, I would say that. I would say that probably. I often say this. I say, people thank me for my service. I say, well, I still think, I got more out of the military than they got out of me. Now that may not be true. I delayed private practice for a long time,
Right.
where I could have certainly made more money. As a civilian lawyer,
Right.
outside, that I made. Not that you make fine money. It's not an issue, but certainly, you do. I did probably give up something, but I would never trade it.
I was going to say.
Never,
Right.
not a million years would I trade that
experience.
That time. Yeah, even the reserve time that I'm doing now is
Right.
just fantastic.
Cool.
Like, I love stepping into that role right now, going to enjoy Basic Andrews, putting that uniform on, and just doing a completely different thing.
Right.
So.
Well, I just want to thank you for the interview, and
Yeah. Well, thanks.
I'm going to go ahead and thank you for your service.
Oh, well, thank you for your service.
Thank you.